Welcome to Winning the Room. In this episode, we're talking with Julie Eckersley. She is the former head of scripted at SBS and a real thought leader when it comes to storytelling. And we're talking about stories and the systems that sit underneath them. Okay, so kicking off with an easy question. What's the best story you've ever heard?
Wow. The best story I've ever heard is stories that I deeply emotionally connect to. And you know what? That changes over time because we change and develop over time. But the stories that most deeply move me are the stories related to my daughter because they go to the core. My daughter was adopted out of foster care. So, you know, her story, that can move me to tears right now because that is so deeply connected to what is amazing to me about life. How about you? What's the best story you've ever heard?
Well, you know, talking about kids and tears, I've got 4 kids. Immediately I start feeling that. So I know one of my kids was very, very sick at the beginning of her life. And she had this reaction, which I've now found out is quite common. Long story short, huge fever and then blue and limp. And I can still remember it. I'm standing at the front of our house. I've got this child between my wrist and elbow. And I'm just like yelling out on the street, like, help, like, you know, she's dying. We're dead. Anyway, wife gets in the car. We drive to the hospital. It's all fine. You know, a few things happened during that hospital, multiple visits. But yeah, I don't know what it is about kids and the sort of the ticker, but it just goes there immediately for me and I guess most people. Anyway.
When you told that beautiful story about your daughter getting sick, you encapsulated the 3 things that make a great story. You had a hero, that was you. You had a mission, a challenge that you needed to do. This baby was dying in your arms and you needed to save her, and you had an outcome. It went somewhere. And so that's a beautiful example of the craft of a great story.
Yeah. And is that what you think about when you think about stories, that kind of structure? Like, does it have to be structured or can it be, you know?
Yeah, well, my writing teacher, Corey Mandel, who's in LA, who I've studied with a lot and really is the person that I feel I learnt story off, he talks about story in 2 parts. There's inspiration, which is the things that come out, this, you know, it's all that kind of lovely flow. It's the interior design, but then the interior design needs craft. It needs the house. And I think the bigger the story you're going to tell, the bigger craft you need. So it's those 2 things coming together that make a great story, particularly if you want to maintain it over time. You need to know the things to pull.
Yeah. It's interesting because you're in the story game. I flirt in the story game. So we design, we potentially over-engineer. But storytelling is quite fundamental, right? Like my understanding is as language was forming, so were stories. And they came together. Yeah. So yeah, we design, but there's also something innate.
Absolutely.
What do you think about that, and you know, how important is that?
I mean, story is the campfire. Story is how we understand each other. Like we are meaning-making machines. We've taught ourselves to make these sounds that are words, which I think is one of the miracles of anything, like that these grunts turn into words and then we add meaning around them. And story is the vehicle through which we convey that meaning to other people, to our communities, and to ourselves. And I think another way to think of the essence of story is that story is a heartbeat. It's something that kind of rises to this point of tension and then releases, rises to this point. And so we enjoy the rise of the tension as much as we enjoy the release. And it is in our very blood to want to have that experience over and over again. Like it's so funny that story has become this sort of revered thing because it's not really. Like we all do it all the time. We are storytellers, from how was your day at work to, you know, the biggest stories we tell of our lives to how we as a society tell our stories. It's everywhere all the time. Everyone is a storyteller.
Yeah. And why do you think it's become so in vogue? Because I think you're right. People talk about stories like it's this magical formula. And yeah, to your point, we revere great storytellers, right? They're seen as Yeah, quite the ultimate human being these days. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, well, I think it's coming back into vogue, actually, because I think it was sort of disrespected for a while because maybe we use it with children a lot. And that, yeah, that's for kids and stories, fairy tales. Blah. But I think as our communication is getting so much more intense and we're online with each other all the time, and also as the marketplace gets so crowded, we're actually realizing that what breaks through, whether you're a brand or
Mm,
a TV maker, is authenticity and connection of story. That story is really powerful. And as the marketplace gets more and more flooded with AI, I mean, AI can churn out endless 30-second clips, not a problem. But to tell a story that is
mhm,
truly authentic, that moves hearts and minds and gets people on the phone saying, you've got to watch this, or retweeting, or whatever, you're communicating with, um, that requires something special that is really clear to us right now.
mm. I love that idea that stories had a little bit of a moment or a dip because they were seen as juvenile. I've never heard that before. I think that's exactly right. Stories were seen as this thing you do with, young kids and sort of spoon feeding information.
Mm.
That's interesting. Like, was it mainstream media that drove that idea, or because I think that's really accurate.
Well, I think one of the things I've become interested in is how we're moving from this industrial era into the digital era. And I think some fundamental things are changing. And I think in the industrial era, humanity and all of that kind of touchy-feely art stuff was very out of vogue, because it was really just like, we need a bunch of factory
Mm,
workers, just go into the office, we don't want any emotions, or go into the factory and churn this out in your day, and that's that, and shut down all the emotion. It's rational. This is what we need to make a good society.
yeah, and it was seen as a luxury
Yeah,
and seen as a line item to pay,
sure.
right? It actually wasn't seen as a very commercial exercise.
And you still see that in our
Yep.
schools. I mean, the fact that the arts are so belittled, so seen as something to throw out,
Mhm.
honestly, it's of another time.
Mm,
Because now we are in a communication time, and the tools of communication and deep communication just become really, really essential to
mm,
how we survive in this time. So I think that's been a significant change that we're still undergoing, actually.
yeah. I have a movie that I watch all the time.
Is it Love Actually?
No, but I do love that
I love
movie.
that movie.
I do love that movie. There's something so rewarding about that movie, and we could break that down. Uh, no, it's Blade Runner for me. So that's a movie that I watched early in my life, and I kinda come back to that movie. I don't know what it is. It's probably I relate with the aesthetic. I love the storyline. I love that idea of, robot, human, does it matter, etcetera. I always come back to that, and I can watch that over and over. What is it that allows stories to be heard and watched over and over for people? Because I know that's not unique to me. I meet lots of people that have a story or a movie that they just continually watch. What is it that makes that okay?
Yeah, for me, that's With Nail and I love that film. Um, I have a friend who goes to sleep every night playing Seinfeld over and over again. And I guess it comes back to that conversation around human connection. That one of the reasons of watching stories is that kind of surprise, but then sometimes hearing human voices, seeing characters that having that sense of certainty, enjoying the aesthetic, all of those are part of the story experience too. That would be
Hmm.
my take on it. Why do you think you keep going back to that movie?
I think it's a level of comfort and home.
Mm.
It just feels like home for me. There's a there's a level of sadness and melancholy, which I personally gravitate towards in stories. Not like a full Debbie Downer, but I just like a bit of sadness, like the helplessness of the replicants and, you know, Batty, the main guy, just his whole, Tears in Rain, that little bit at the end is just so beautiful. So I guess sadness and comfort and home. So that's probably why.
And from what you've told me in our discussions too, I can hear you working through this idea of technology and humanity.
Mm,
And so I would say, as a kind of amateur psychologist guess, that film captures something very core at the
mm,
heart of what you're working through. So it continues to be something you want to explore, and seeing that story is therefore still resonating with you.
yeah, it's very astute. Maybe you need to get a second doctorate. Story tropes. They seem to have a season. So horror has a moment, then rom-coms have a moment. Do you think that's right? Do things have seasons? And if so, why? And what's in it for people?
Yeah, Shonda Rhimes, who's one of the most incredible showrunners in the world, she talks a lot about this and about how a story needs to meet a moment in time. And I think some of the things you see is the trend between, when things are going well, that people can sort of have more of that gritty political drama. And then when things are not going so well, arguably now, we see a rise of not only that that comfort rom-com style, but also weirdly horrors have come back. And I'm actually working on a horror at the moment, and I said to these lovely, lovely directors, I was like, why? Why did you want to do this? And they said for them, creating this horror, it kind of exercises something. Like, in a way, it helps them work through it. They didn't quite use those terms, but, I think we definitely see trends like that in terms of stories reflecting or playing against what's going on in society. And that comes back to stories being part of how we understand the world.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm sure you know Blake Schneider, Save the Cat, that guy in the US.
Yeah.
Very interesting, I
Yeah.
think. He talks about 10 types of stories only. I think it's like Buddy Love and Who Done It and Golden Fleece. Anyway, he's got a list of 10. And his belief, and I think I buy it, every story that is told is really a version of one of those stories. So, Star Wars, really just the story of, Jesus, really it's just a hero's journey, for example. Your thoughts on that? Is it too simplistic, or do you think there really are a finite amount of stories out there?
Well, I think kind of there's one story. Actually,
Okay.
every story is a coming of age story, really. It's because stories are about overcoming challenges or trying to and failing. So, if you want to be reductive like that, then there really is one story. Like, what did you try and do? How hard was it? What did you learn? How
Right.
complicated did that get? Like, they're variations of that,
Yeah.
really.
So it sounds like obstacles, complications with a result. That's your definition of story, it sounds like.
The best explanation of story I've ever heard is from the Pixar team. You know those
Yeah, of
guys, they
course.
make some of the best movies in the
Amazing.
world, Toy Story and so many fantastic movies. I went to a workshop of them, and this is how they
That's cool.
describe story.
Yeah.
They describe story as every day, so something's got with just normal life going along, and then one day, which you could call the inciting incident. One day, and because of that, things got harder, more complicated, the escalation. And because of that, things got even more hard and more complicated, another escalation. And because of that, it's a climax. Things are really not going well. And in the end, resolution, heartbeat over.
Yeah. With change.
Yeah, with change.
I've always heard that idea of there must be change. Otherwise, if you've got that, up, down, same, it's actually not as rewarding for audiences. Is that true? I don't know. That's what I've always heard.
I think the aspiration of change is absolutely part of story, or the resistance to change as something that is a tragedy.
Yeah.
Someone who just will not change, and how that plays out can be really engaging as well.
Yeah. So I've never been in this writing room, but I wish I had. The guys who created South Park, you may have already heard this.
Oh, yeah, I love it.
At the end of every scene, they never say and.
Yes.
So it's not something happened and something else happened.
But because. Yeah, that is.
Right? Which I think is so simple.
Oh, my goodness.
But brilliant.
I use that all the time. That is so the basic, just to extrapolate on what you're saying, the idea that, when I was talking about these escalations, right?
Yeah.
If a story has this happened and then this happened and then this happened, it really is just a bunch of scenarios. And there's none of the kind of rising heartbeat that we want to get that satisfaction of the payoff. But if you put the word this happened, but then this happened, because of that, this happened, that's the idea that these guys are saying, which are, amazing storytellers, that then creates this escalation engagement, and it also creates something else that you need in great stories, which is cause and effect.
Yeah.
Cause and effect. This happened and therefore that happened.
Yeah.
So when you're crafting a film or a television show, it's really important that you build in that cause and effect to create an ongoing escalation.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I guess in many ways, back to your idea of AI, I've trained a bot. I've got that bot to read my book.
Mm.
I've given that bot every principle and technique that I think is important. And I bet you if I said to that bot, which I sometimes do, hey, here's a scenario. Write me a story. And at the end of every scene, make sure there's a but or a because or a therefore.
Mm.
Do a pretty good job of that.
Yeah, I'm sure it would.
Yeah.
I mean,
why isn't that enough?
that's a good question. And I feel really careful when we're talking about AI at the moment because I suspect it's far more powerful than any of us understand. I also like to believe it's plugged in somewhere, so that plug can be pulled out.
I don't think so, unfortunately.
Yeah, maybe not. And I don't necessarily think it will. I think it's here, and now we have to adjust with it. I think the best case scenario is that it's a tool. Like the art of story has changed a lot. Like from the campfire to now, I mean, there's a lot of things that have changed.
Yeah.
Again, coming back to Corey Mandel, he would say that writing is an energy transfer business. So there's this saying that we have in film and television, if a writer phoned the script in. And essentially what that means is it's colour by numbers. You're not getting any heart out of it. Or other writers talk about, putting blood on the page or that sort of essence.
Yeah.
So I guess where I think about AI, and I know it can do a lot of things, and this morning I just saw a movie that's coming out that is fundamentally AI. I mean, and now people can talk. I watched shorts this week where people are talking like it's going like this. It's unbelievable. But can it make mistakes? Can it have humanity? Is there something in that energy transfer business that we need? Or or is it going to fall down there? Or not even fall down there, but is it just going to need a partnership of a human with that?
Yeah. I think, look, like everybody, I don't know, but I've got to believe there'll be a partnership with some humans. And I think not most humans. And I think that's probably what worries me the most. I think it's going to be a tale of two scenarios. One scenario, elite, expert, you're with the machines, and then everybody else, which is the vast majority. And they are going to be, in my opinion, relegated to either no work or relatively menial work, which is, I think hugely depressing. But if we do go there, I reckon the only defendable part is in-person moments. So, and maybe that's built on storytelling, but in-person moments where you can express yourself and you can make the most of now, this moment, right? Every present moment. And what can you do to bring yourself forward as an individual, again, above the muck of AI, which is going to be democratized and similar and comprehensive? How can you sit above that, be yourself, self-express, and make it feel like this is a individual moment, one-off, bespoke, never going to happen again? I reckon those two things together, that feels like the final frontier, the thing we can really defend. And hey, that may be enough. Like for some people, that's where I get worried. I just don't think there's enough of that for everybody. It's going to be a few elite, the Rick Rubins of the world, and then everybody else. Yeah. Thoughts on that terrible dystopia?
Wow. Well, I'm an optimist.
So am I. I'm a realist optimist. But anyway,
yeah. Look, we don't know. We're going to look
really
at this
don't.
in a couple of
exactly.
years. We're going to go,
Jeez, that guy was out of touch.
Yeah, we had no idea. But I think there are options. I think we're in the choosing phase. And I think we get to make choices about those things and, who we want to be.
I wish it was people like you choosing. The problem is it's not, right? Like I wish I was able to choose people like yourself, people that understand the importance of arts and everything else. But it's tech people. It's tech people that are going for AGI, et cetera, and it's all about advancement. Anyway, I'm being completely negative, but I think there's an important negative edge to AI and where technology is going and what it means for human connection.
Yeah, except we are human beings and we do want human connection. So at the end of the day...
More than money?
Well, I mean, that depends on the person, doesn't it?
Mm.
Because, I mean, we need money. That's part of how we work. And, as my mum says, money doesn't buy happiness, but it helps. That's important part of life, right? Um, but I'm glad when I think back to some of my years in my 20s, like some lonely times that I really felt disconnected from people before social media.
Mm.
And, lots changed in my life since then. But at that time, when I was at home, if I couldn't find someone on the phone and I didn't have somewhere to go, it could be quite isolating in our culture. And I think now there's so many more points of connection, and they might be through
Mm.
digital devices, but essentially they're human to human connection on some level. Even if that's having access to more stories and more stories that
Yeah.
I can relate to, like I think that's been massive for the queer community, for example. Used to be impossible to find stories. And through this kind of end of mass media moving into niche media, there's so much more opportunities for people to service and find stories that they relate to. So doesn't quite answer your question,
Mm.
but I think we are human beings, and that's more the frontier that I think's important. I have heard things about, bringing more technology into our own bodies. And similarly, people like Greg Braden saying once we make those changes, we can't actually undo them. That
Yeah.
changes our DNA. So that point in which we potentially lose our humanity seems to me like much more concerning.
Thanks for listening to this episode. It's a really important conversation that needs to happen, and you can find us anywhere where you get high-quality podcasts. If you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, make sure you check out the next episode.